The morning sky over planet Kalara burned red with the light of enemy ships. Commander Valix pressed his thin, bark-like fingers against the viewing window of the command center and watched his world die. The crystalline towers that had taken centuries to grow were melting under plasma fire. The beautiful gardens where his people had lived in peace for generations were now fields of ash. "Sir, the northern district is gone," reported his aide, her voice shaking like leaves in a storm. "The Vorthak forces landed 30 minutes ago. They're killing everyone." Felix closed his eyes. His people, the Zephyrians, had never known war. They were plant-based beings who had evolved on a gentle world where the worst danger was a storm that might damage their gardens. They had no weapons, no armies, no concept of deliberate violence. Their bodies were fragile, built for peaceful work under a kind sun. "How many ships do they have?" he asked. "Over 200 warships, sir. Maybe more coming." The numbers meant death. The Vorthak Empire was known across the galaxy for one thing. They took what they wanted and killed anyone who stood in their way. They had destroyed dozens of worlds, enslaving some populations and wiping out others entirely. Now they wanted Kalara for its rich soil and perfect climate. "Send word to all settlements," Velix said. "Everyone must evacuate to the deep caves immediately." But even as he gave the order, he knew it would only delay the end. The caves would buy them days, maybe weeks. The Vorthak would dig them out eventually. They always did. Another explosion shook the building. Through the window, Valix could see the enemy soldiers moving through his city. They were reptilian creatures twice the height of Zephyrians, with thick armor and weapons that could cut through stone. They moved with the confidence of predators who had done this many times before. "Sir?" his communications officer called out. "Should we send a distress signal?" Valix thought about this. The galaxy had learned to fear the Vorthak. Most species would ignore a call for help, afraid of bringing the Empire's anger upon themselves. The few who might want to help lacked the military strength to make a difference. "Yes," he said finally. "Send the signal on all frequencies. Tell them we are a peaceful people under attack. Tell them we have children hiding in caves while our cities burn." The signal went out across space carrying the desperate words of a dying world. It reached the cold silence between stars and traveled to distant worlds. Most who received it would shake their heads sadly and delete the message. What could they do against the might of the Vorthak Empire? Days passed. The Vorthak forces pushed deeper into Zephyrian territory. Refugee camps in the caves grew crowded with families who had lost everything. The few weapons the Zephyrians had were farming tools and scientific instruments. Against military-grade plasma rifles, they might as well have been throwing flowers. Then on the fourth day, something unexpected happened. "Sir," the communications officer's voice carried a note of surprise. "We're getting a response to our distress call." Velix looked up from the evacuation reports he had been reading. "From who?" "They call themselves humans. From a planet called Earth. They say they're sending help." "How many ships?" The officer checked his instruments. "The signal is weak, sir. I count maybe 12 ships, possibly 15 ships, against 200 Vorthak warships." Felix felt his hope die as quickly as it had been born. These humans, whoever they were, would arrive just in time to join the Zephyrians in death. "Sir, there's something else. They're asking for tactical information. Troop positions, weapon capabilities, civilian locations. They want to know everything about the Vorthak forces." This was strange. Most species who responded to distress calls offered to take refugees or provide supplies. These humans were asking questions like they planned to fight. "Give them what they want," Velix said. "If they're brave enough to try, the least we can do is help them understand what they're facing." The days that followed were the longest of Velix's life. The Vorthak forces continued their advance, burning everything in their path. The caves echoed with the cries of children who didn't understand why their homes were gone. The adults tried to stay strong, but Velix could see the despair in their eyes. On the 7th day, the human ships arrived. Velix was in the deep command bunker when the news came. "Sir, we have contacts dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system." "The humans?" "Yes, sir. 15 ships, just like they said." Velix felt a mix of gratitude and sadness. These strangers had traveled across space to help people they had never met. It was noble. It was also suicide. Have the Vorthak noticed them? "Yes, sir. They're moving to intercept. General Thaxer is leading the response personally." General Thaxer. Even Velix knew that name. The Butcher of 6 Worlds. The Vorthak commander, who took personal pleasure in the destruction of peaceful civilizations. He commanded over 300 ships now. With reinforcements arriving daily, sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. Put it through. A voice filled the bunker, speaking in accented but clear galactic standard. Kalara Command, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the human ship Defiance. We received your distress call. We're here to help. The voice was calm, professional, but there was something else in it. Something that made Velix pause. It wasn't the voice of someone who felt doomed. It was the voice of someone who had made a decision and would see it through to the end. Captain Morrison, Velix replied, we are grateful for your response, but you should know the situation is hopeless. The Vorthak have overwhelming numbers. There was a pause before the human captain replied, Sir, we've studied the tactical data you sent. We know what we're facing, but we have a rule. We don't leave people to die, not if there's something we can do about it. But Captain, you're 15 ships against their fleet. Actually, sir, it's 12 ships. 3 of ours broke down on the way here. The human's voice carried what sounded almost like amusement. But don't worry about the numbers. We've faced worse odds before. As the transmission ended, Velix stared at the communications panel in wonder. These humans were either the bravest beings in the galaxy, or the most foolish. Either way, they had come when no one else would. In the depths of space above Kalara, 2 fleets prepared for battle. One fought for conquest and glory. The other fought for the lives of strangers they had never met. The war for Kalara was about to begin. The transport ship landed in a clearing near the cave system where the Zephyrian survivors were hiding. Commander Velix waited with Elder Thys and a small group of his people, ready to meet their rescuers face to face. They had prepared a traditional welcome ceremony. With flowers and songs of gratitude, the ship's door opened with a hiss of air, and the first human stepped out. Every Zephyrian in the welcoming party took a step backward. The creature that emerged was a nightmare given flesh. It walked on 2 legs like a civilized being, but everything else about it screamed predator. Its eyes faced forward like a hunter. Its mouth was filled with sharp white teeth that it showed when it spoke. Its body was thick with muscle, built for violence and destruction. Good morning, the human said, its voice deep and rough. I'm Captain Jake Morrison. Which one of you is Commander Velix? Velix forced himself to step forward, though every instinct told him to run. I am Velix, he managed to say. The human captain smiled, showing even more of those terrible teeth. Glad to meet you, Commander. This is my team. He gestured to the other humans emerging from the ship. Combat Medic Lisa Carter, Sergeant Danny Rodriguez, Lieutenant Amy Walsh, and Corporal Kevin Brooks. Each human looked as frightening as the first. The female called Lisa Carter carried a bag that rattled with what sounded like metal instruments. The one called Rodriguez had weapons strapped all over his body and moved with the fluid grace of a natural killer. Amy Walsh studied the Zephyrians with cold, calculating eyes, while Kevin Brooks checked some kind of rifle with the casual efficiency of a being born to warfare. We should get you to safety, Elder Thys whispered to Velix in their own language. These creatures are as dangerous as the Vorthak. But Captain Morrison had heard her somehow. Ma'am, I understand your concern. We know we look different from you, but we're here to help, I promise. The fact that this predator could speak their language only made it more terrifying. Perhaps, Velix said carefully, you could tell us about your battle plan? The humans exchanged looks. Lieutenant Walsh stepped forward with a data pad. We've analyzed the Vorthak positions. Their main force is concentrated in 3 areas. We recommend a simultaneous strike on all 3 positions while evacuating civilians through these mountain passes. She showed them tactical displays covered in red marks, indicating enemy positions and blue arrows showing attack routes. The casual way she discussed death and destruction made Velix's sap run cold. Casualty projections? Asked Captain Morrison. 30% losses in the first wave, assuming normal engagement parameters, Walsh replied without emotion. Higher if they have air support. The Zephyrians stared in horror. These beings discussed the deaths of their own people like gardeners planning which plants to trim. Corporal Brooks finished checking his weapon and slung it over his shoulder. Captain, should we set up the heavy guns on the ridge line? The plasma cannons will give us good coverage of the valley approaches. Good thinking, Brooks. Rodriguez, take your squad and scout the northern perimeter. I want to know about any Vorthak patrols in the area. Sergeant Rodriguez nodded and disappeared into the forest with 3 other humans who had been unloading equipment. They moved through the trees like shadows, silent and deadly. Elder Thies pulled Valix aside. "We have made a terrible mistake," she whispered. "These humans are not saviors. They are killers, just like the Vorthak. We have traded one group of monsters for another." Felix watched as the humans set up their equipment with military precision. Dr. Carter was establishing a medical station, but even her healing tools looked like instruments of torture to Zephyrian eyes. Captain Morrison was studying maps and marking targets with the same focus a predator might show when stalking prey. "Commander," Captain Morrison called out, "we need to discuss civilian evacuation routes. My people will hold the Vorthak forces while you get your people to safety." "Your people will fight alone?" Felix asked. The human captain nodded. "That's what we do. But there are hundreds of enemy soldiers. You are only a few." Morrison smiled that frightening smile again. "Numbers aren't everything, Commander. We've learned that over the years." Lieutenant Walsh was now explaining the battle plan to some of Valix's advisors. Her calm description of flanking maneuvers and kill zones made them wilt like flowers in frost. She spoke of death with the same tone another being might use to discuss the weather. "The key is to divide their forces," she was saying. "Draw them into these narrow passes where their numbers become a disadvantage. Then we hit them from above with concentrated fire." One of the Zephyrian advisors asked, "What about prisoners? Do we try to capture some for questioning?" The humans all looked at him with expressions that might have been surprise. Corporal Brooks actually laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Sir," Rodriguez's voice came through the communication device, "I've got eyes on a Vorthak patrol. 12 soldiers moving this way. Should be here in 20 minutes. Without hesitation, Captain Morrison grabbed his weapon. "Take them out quietly. We can't let them report our position." "Understood, sir. Moving to intercept." The casual way they discussed killing made Valix feel sick. These humans were efficient killers just like the Vorthak. The only difference was that they claimed to be killing for the Zephyrians instead of against them. Dr. Carter noticed his distress. "Commander, are you feeling well? You look pale." Even her attempt at kindness felt threatening. Felix looked at her medical equipment and saw torture devices. He looked at her gentle expression and saw a predator pretending to care about its prey. "We're fine," he said quickly. 10 minutes later, Rodriguez's voice came through the communicator again. "Patrol neutralized. No survivors. No chance for them to send a warning. 12 lives ended in minutes, discussed like a minor maintenance task. The humans showed no emotion, no regret, no acknowledgement that they had just killed thinking beings." Elder Thies approached Captain Morrison with tears in her eyes. "Captain, we are grateful for your help, but we must ask, are you here to save us or to conquer us?" The human looked genuinely confused. "Ma'am, we're here because you asked for help. We fight the Vorthak, you get your world back. That's the deal. But you enjoy the killing." "Enjoy?" Morrison frowned, and for a moment his expression was almost human. "Ma'am, we don't enjoy war. War is hell, but sometimes it's the only way to protect innocent people." He looked out at the forest where his soldiers were preparing for battle. "Every human in my unit volunteered for this mission." They knew the odds. They knew most of them probably won't make it home. But they came anyway, because they couldn't stand the thought of your children dying while they did nothing. Felix studied the human captain's face, trying to understand. These creatures were killers, yes. But they were killers who had traveled across space to fight for people they had never met. "Sir," Lieutenant Walsh interrupted, "long-range sensors show the main Vorthak force is moving toward our position. We have maybe 6 hours before they arrive in full strength." Captain Morrison nodded. "Then we better get ready." He turned back to Valix. "Commander, I need your people to start the evacuation now. My soldiers will buy you as much time as we can." As the Zephyrians began to retreat deeper into the caves, Valix looked back at the humans preparing for battle. They were predators, killers, creatures of violence and death. But they were using those terrible gifts to protect his people. He still didn't understand them. But for the first time since their arrival, he began to hope that maybe, just maybe, they might actually win. The battle began at dawn. Commander Valix watched from the safety of the deep caves as explosions lit up the sky above Kalara. The human ships were fighting the entire Vorthak fleet, and somehow they were not being instantly destroyed. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're picking up battle chatter from the human ships. They're using some kind of tactic I've never seen before." On the display screens, the impossible was happening. The tiny human fleet was not running from the massive Vorthak armada. Instead, they were diving straight into it, their ships moving in patterns that seemed almost like dancing. They would appear, strike hard and fast, then vanish before the enemy could respond. How are they doing that? Felix asked. They're using the asteroid field, sir, flying through spaces too narrow for the larger Vorthak ships, and their ships are much faster than anything in the Vorthak fleet. Above the planet, Commander Susan Hayes led her squadron of human fighters in a desperate charge against a Vorthak battlecruiser. Her ship was damaged, systems failing, but she pressed the attack anyway. This is Hayes to all ships, her voice came through the communicators. We've got a breach in their shields. All fighters, focus fire on Section 7. The human pilots responded instantly, their ships swarming the giant enemy vessel like angry insects. They took losses, but they kept attacking. When pilot Alex Turner's fighter was hit and started spinning out of control, he didn't try to save himself. Instead, he pointed his burning ship at the enemy bridge and hit the thrusters. "Tell my wife I love her," were his last words before his ship exploded against the Vorthak command center. On the planet's surface, Captain Morrison and his team were facing a different kind of battle. The main Vorthak ground force had arrived, and they were pushing toward the cave system where the Zephyrians were hiding. "They've got armor support," Sergeant Rodriguez reported from his position on the ridge. "Looks like 50 tanks and about 300 infantry." "Copy that," Morrison replied. "All teams implement Plan Charlie. Make them work for every inch." The Zephyrians watching from the caves couldn't believe what they were seeing. The human soldiers moved like ghosts through the forest, striking the enemy and then disappearing before the Vorthak could return fire. They used the terrain, the trees, even the weather to their advantage. When Corporal Brooks ran out of ammunition for his rifle, he didn't retreat. Instead, he pulled out a knife and charged a group of Vorthak soldiers. The blade should have been useless against their armor, but somehow he found the weak points. Striking with surgical precision, "These humans fight like demons," one of the Zephyrian elders whispered. But Elder Theiss was watching more carefully. "No," she said slowly. "They fight like people who have nothing left to lose." She had seen Sergeant Maria Santos cover the retreat of wounded Zephyrians, staying behind to hold off an entire enemy squad by herself. The human woman was hit 3 times but kept fighting until the civilians were safe. When Dr. Lisa Carter ran out into the open battlefield to treat the wounded, she did it without hesitation, even though enemy fire was exploding all around her. In space, Chief Engineer Tony Martinez was working miracles. His ship had been hit so many times it should have been dead, but he kept the engines running with spare parts and sheer determination. "Captain, we've lost main power," he reported to Commander Hayes. "Can you get it back? Give me 5 minutes and some prayer." Martinez crawled through burning corridors and flooded compartments, jury-rigging repairs that should have been impossible. When the main reactor was damaged beyond fixing, he rerouted power through the life support systems, accepting that the crew would have to live on emergency air for the rest of the battle. The Vorthak forces were starting to realize they were not fighting a normal enemy. These humans didn't follow the usual rules of warfare. When surrounded, they fought harder. When outnumbered, they got creative. When facing certain death, they smiled and kept shooting. General Thaxor, commanding the Vorthak invasion, was becoming frustrated. "How many of these humans are there?" he demanded. "Our intelligence says maybe 200 soldiers, sir, plus their ship crews." 200? "We have thousands." "Yes, sir, but their casualties are much lower than projected. They're using tactics we've never seen before." On the ground, Major Chris Thompson was leading a mixed group of humans and brave Zephyrian volunteers in a raid on the Vorthak supply depot. The Zephyrians had been terrified of fighting, but watching the humans risk everything for strangers had inspired some of them to pick up weapons. "Stay low and follow my lead," Thompson told them. "We hit fast, take what we can, and get out." The raid was a success, but it cost them. Private Ryan Clark, barely old enough to shave, stayed behind to hold off the Vorthak reinforcements while the others escaped with the supplies. He was found later, surrounded by the bodies of enemy soldiers still gripping his rifle. Elder Thiss was with Dr. Carter when they brought Ryan's body back. She watched the human medic try to save him, working with desperate skill even though it was clearly too late. "He was just a child," Thiss said softly. Carter looked up, tears in her eyes. "He was 19, same age as my son back home. Why do you do this? Why do you come so far to die for people you don't know?" The human doctor was quiet for a long moment. "Because someone has to," she said finally. Because if we don't stand up for each other, who will? The battle raged for 3 days. Slowly and possibly, the humans were winning. Their casualties were heavy, but they kept fighting with a determination that amazed the Zephyrians. They didn't fight for glory or conquest. They fought because they had promised to protect innocent people, and they would die before breaking that promise. Captain Morrison was wounded but still giving orders when the tide finally turned. The Vorthak fleet, battered and confused by human tactics, began to retreat. On the ground, the enemy forces were pulling back, no longer confident in their overwhelming numbers. "Sir," Lieutenant Walsh reported, her uniform torn and bloody, "the enemy is requesting permission to withdraw from the system." Morrison looked at the tactical display, showing the scattered remains of what had been the most feared military force in the galaxy. "Let them go," he said. "But make sure they know. If they come back, we'll be waiting." As the last Vorthak ships limped away from Kalara, the Zephyrians emerged from their caves to find their world saved by the very beings they had feared. The humans were battered, exhausted, and had lost many of their own, but they had kept their promise. Elder Thiss approached Captain Morrison as Dr. Carter bandaged his wounds. "I owe you an apology," she said. "We thought you were monsters." Morrison looked up at her with those strange, forward-facing eyes that no longer seemed quite so frightening. "Maybe we are monsters, Elder, but sometimes you need monsters to fight other monsters." "No," she said firmly. "Monsters destroy. You protect. That makes you something else entirely." For the first time since they had arrived, the human captain's smile looked gentle instead of predatory. "Thank you, Elder. That means more than you know." As the human ships prepared to leave, taking their wounded and their dead, the Zephyrians watched with new understanding. These strange, violent beings from their death world had shown them that strength could be used to shield the weak, that warriors could be protectors, and that sometimes the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy were exactly the ones you wanted on your side when everything went wrong. The rescue mission came 3 weeks after the main battle ended. Intelligence reports had reached the human fleet that a group of Zephyrian civilians, including several children, were being held prisoner in a Vorthak labor camp on the far side of Kalara. The enemy had left them behind when they retreated, either forgotten or abandoned as too much trouble to transport. Captain Morrison called for volunteers. Every single human on his ship stepped forward. "This is going to be dangerous," he told them in the briefing room. "The camp is heavily fortified, and we don't know how many guards they left behind. We'll be going in with minimal support, and extraction will be difficult." Sergeant Danny Rodriguez raised his hand. "With respect, sir, what's the point of saving a world if we leave people behind to suffer?" The mission team was small. Rodriguez, Corporal Kevin Brooks, Communications Officer Rachel Stone, and 6 other Marines. They would go in fast and quiet, locate the prisoners, and get them out before the Vorthak knew what was happening. Dr. Helen Ross volunteered to go with them. "They'll need medical attention," she said when Morrison tried to talk her out of it. "Some of those prisoners have been in that camp for months." Elder Thiss insisted on joining the mission as well. "My people will be terrified," she explained. "They need to see a familiar face, someone they trust." The team moved out at midnight using a small transport ship that could avoid the enemy sensors. They landed 20 miles from the camp and made their way through the forest on foot. The Zephyrians hiding in the caves tracked their progress through radio reports. "Team leader to base," Rodriguez's voice crackled through the communicators. "We have eyes on the target. Looks like about 50 guards plus automated defenses." Commander Valix felt his hope sink. 50 guards against 8 humans seemed like impossible odds, even after everything he had seen these strange warriors accomplish. "Sir," Communications Officer Stone reported, "we've located the prisoners. They're being held in 3 separate compounds. Looks like about 200 civilians total. Condition?" There was a pause before Dr. Ross answered. "Not good, Sergeant. I can see some of them from here through the scopes. They're malnourished, and several appear to be injured. We need to move fast." The humans spent 2 hours studying the camp, mapping guard positions and identifying weak points in the defenses. Their patience amazed the Zephyrians listening in. These warriors, who had seemed so eager for battle, were now taking every precaution to ensure the mission succeeded. "All right, people," Rodriguez finally said. "We go in 20 minutes. Brooks, you and your team take the north compound. Stone and Martinez handle communications and watch our backs. Doc, you and Elder Thys stay with the transport until we've secured the area. I want to go with the first wave, Elder Thys protested. Ma'am, with respect, we need you alive to help the prisoners once we get them out. If something goes wrong, the Elder understood. If the rescue team was killed, she would be the only hope of getting the survivors to safety. The attack began with deadly silence. The humans moved through the camp like shadows, taking out guards with swift efficiency. They used weapons that made no sound, knives that struck without warning, and tactics that left the enemy confused and frightened. But something went wrong. Base, we have a problem. Stone's voice came through the communicator, tight with tension. They had more guards than we thought, and someone triggered an alarm. The whole camp is waking up. Gunfire erupted across the facility. The humans found themselves fighting a running battle while trying to protect 200 terrified civilians. Dr. Ross ran from compound to compound, treating wounded prisoners while explosions went off around her. Rodriguez to base. The sergeant's voice was calm despite the chaos. We've got the prisoners, but we're taking heavy fire. Extraction is going to be difficult. Private Ryan Clark was with the rear guard, holding off Vorthak reinforcements while the civilians were loaded onto transports. His position was overrun, but he kept fighting, buying precious minutes for the evacuation. Clark, fall back. Rodriguez ordered. Can't do it, Sarge. If I move, they'll overrun the landing zone. Those were his last words. The young soldier held his position until the last civilian was safe, fighting alone against impossible odds. When the rescue team found his body later, he was surrounded by enemy soldiers, his rifle empty but his position held. Elder Thys watched Dr. Ross work on the injured prisoners during the flight back to safety. The human medic had been awake for 36 hours straight, but she refused to rest while people were suffering. This one has been beaten, Ross said, examining a young Zephyrian. Probably infected wounds too. We need to get him to the main medical facility immediately. The doctor's hands were gentle as she treated patients, but Thys could see the anger in her eyes. These humans felt the suffering of strangers as if it were their own pain. Doctor, Thys asked quietly, why do you care so much? These are not your people. Ross looked up from her patient. Elder, where I come from, we have a saying. We're all someone's children. This boy is someone's son. That woman is someone's mother. How could I not care? When they reached the main refugee camp, the rescued prisoners were reunited with their families. The joy and relief were overwhelming, but it was tempered by grief for those who had been lost, especially Private Clark. Captain Morrison read the names of the fallen at a memorial service. His voice was steady, but those who knew him could see the weight each name carried. Ryan Clark was 19 years old, he said. He joined the service because he wanted to help people. He died doing exactly that, saving lives he considered more valuable than his own. The Zephyrians listened in silence. They were beginning to understand that these humans were not the heartless killers they had first appeared to be. They felt deeply, loved fiercely, and grieved for their lost companions. Their capacity for violence was matched by their capacity for compassion. Elder Thys spoke at the memorial as well. Private Clark and the others who died for us represent something we had never seen before, she said. They were strangers who became family, warriors who became protectors, aliens who became friends. Lieutenant Colonel Sam Parker, who had led the space battle, was in the audience. He had lost 12 crew members in the fighting, and the pain showed on his scarred face. The hardest part, he said afterward, is writing the letters to their families. How do you tell a mother that her son died for people she's never met, on a world she's never heard of? What do you tell them? Thys asked. Parker was quiet for a moment. I tell them the truth, that their children died as heroes, that they saved innocent lives, that they made their species proud. The memorial service ended with the lighting of candles for the dead. Each flame represented a human life given freely for the sake of strangers. The Zephyrians who attended the ceremony would never forget the sight of those lights or what they represented. As the days passed, more stories emerged. Stories of Sergeant Maria Santos staying behind to cover civilian evacuations. Stories of tech specialist Nicole Green keeping the communication systems running despite being wounded. Stories of ordinary humans doing extraordinary things because it was the right thing to do. Commander Velix found himself working closely with Communications Officer Rachel Stone to coordinate relief efforts. He was surprised by how easy it was to talk to her, how she listened to his concerns and offered practical solutions. "You're not what we expected," he told her one evening as they reviewed supply distributions. Stone smiled, and for once it didn't look predatory at all. "What did you expect? Conquerors, tyrants, beings who would demand payment for their help. Some humans are like that," she admitted. "But most of us just want to live in peace and help each other when we can. The universe is dangerous enough without making more enemies." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent message from the scouts. A small group of Vorthak soldiers had been spotted near the southern settlements, apparently cut off from their main force when the retreat began. "They're not attacking," the scout reported. "They seem lost, maybe looking for a way off the planet." Captain Morrison made the decision that surprised everyone, including his own crew. "We'll offer them safe passage off-world, on one condition. They surrender their weapons and submit to questioning about other prisoners or camps we might have missed." "Sir," Lieutenant Walsh protested. "These are the enemy. They're defeated soldiers far from home," Morrison replied. "We're better than our enemies because we know when to show mercy." The gesture shocked the Zephyrians almost as much as the humans' fighting ability had. These warriors who had shown such ruthless efficiency in battle were now offering kindness to their former enemies. When the Vorthak soldiers accepted the offer, surrendering their weapons in exchange for safe passage, Elder Thys finally understood what made humans so unique. They were capable of both terrible violence and profound mercy, and they chose which face to show based on what the situation required. "You are truly strange beings," she told Captain Morrison. "How so?" "You have the strength to destroy, but you choose to protect. You have the power to conquer, but you offer friendship instead. Where we come from, such beings exist only in legends." Morrison looked out at the camps where human and Zephyrian medical. The final attack came without warning. The Vorthak forces, thought to be in full retreat, had regrouped at the edge of the solar system and made one desperate attempt to salvage their campaign. If they could not have Kalara, they would make sure no one else could either. General Thaxer himself led the attack, commanding a massive dreadnought loaded with planet-killing weapons. His plan was simple: destroy the Zephyrian capital from orbit, eliminate the human fleet, and leave the world uninhabitable as a warning to others who might resist the Empire. "Sir," Lieutenant Amy Walsh reported to Captain Morrison, "long-range sensors are picking up a massive energy signature. It's heading straight for the capital city." Morrison looked at the tactical display and felt ice in his veins. The weapon charging on the Vorthak dreadnought was designed to crack continents. Even if they evacuated the capital, the blast would kill millions and render half the planet uninhabitable. "Time to impact?" he asked. 18 minutes, sir. Not enough time to evacuate. Not enough time for reinforcements to arrive." The human fleet was still recovering from the previous battles. Many ships damaged and crews exhausted. "All ships, this is Morrison," the captain broadcast to his fleet. "Emergency action stations. We're going to stop that dreadnought." Commander Susan Hayes, whose ship had been patched together with spare parts and determination, responded immediately. "Sir, our main guns are offline and we've lost half our fighter complement. Then we'll use what we have left. All ships prepare for ramming speed." The word sent a chill through both human and Zephyrian listeners. Ramming speed meant suicide. It meant pointing damaged ships at the enemy and hoping to do enough damage before dying to make the sacrifice worthwhile. On the planet's surface, Elder Thys gathered the Zephyrian Council in the deep caves. "The humans are going to die for us," she told them. "All of them. They know they cannot win, but they are going anyway." Commander Valek stared at the reports coming in from orbit. The human ships were accelerating toward the massive enemy vessel, their crews calm and professional as they prepared for death. "Why?" one of the counselors asked. "Why would they do this?" "Because they promised to protect us," Thys answered. "And they keep their promises." In space, the battle was desperate and terrible. The human ships dove at the Vorthak dreadnought like birds attacking a giant. They were swatted aside by defensive fire, but they kept coming. Each attack damaged the great ship's shields and weapons, buying precious time. Lieutenant Colonel Sam Parker led his squadron in a frontal assault on the dreadnought's main gun. "This is Parker to all ships. If we can knock out that weapon, we save the planet. It's worth it." His ship was hit and began spinning out of control, but Parker kept firing until the last second. His sacrifice damaged the main weapon but did not destroy it. Captain Morrison watched his fleet die around him and made the hardest decision of his life. "All surviving ships, this is Morrison. I'm ordering you to withdraw to minimum safe distance. Sir, we're not leaving you, Commander Hayes protested. That's an order. Susan, someone needs to survive to tell the story. Morrison turned to his crew. Tech specialist Nicole Green was at her station, keeping the ship running despite massive damage. Dr. Helen Ross was in sickbay, treating wounded crew members who would all be dead in minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, Morrison announced over the ship's intercom, it's been an honor serving with you. The ship Defiance, battered and burning, accelerated toward the Vorthak dreadnought. Morrison aimed for the enemy's power core, knowing that even a damaged human ship could cause significant destruction if it hit the right spot. But something unexpected happened. Captain, Green called out, I'm reading massive power fluctuations in their main weapon. I think Parker's attack did more damage than we thought. The Vorthak dreadnought's planet-killer weapon was overloading, its damaged systems creating a feedback loop that threatened to destroy the ship from within. General Thaxor ordered an emergency shutdown, but it was too late. Morrison's ship struck the enemy vessel just as its main weapon exploded. The combination of ramming attack and internal explosion tore the dreadnought apart, sending debris spinning across space. The threat to Kalara died with it, but the Defiance was also destroyed in the explosion. Captain Morrison and his crew had given their lives to save a world they barely knew. The surviving human ships limped back to Kalara's orbit, their crews grieving for their fallen comrades. Of the 12 ships that had responded to the Zephyrian distress call, only 4 were still operational. Commander Hayes, now the senior officer, established contact with the planet's surface. Kalara Control, this is the human fleet. The threat has been eliminated. Your world is safe. Elder Thys received the message in the deep command bunker surrounded by her people. The humans had kept their promise. They had saved the Zephyrians, but at a cost that took her breath away. When the surviving humans came to the planet's surface for the victory celebration, the Zephyrians were waiting for them. But instead of celebration, they found a memorial service. The humans gathered in silence around simple markers representing their fallen friends. They did not boast of victory or speak of glory. They mourned their dead and honored their sacrifice. Elder Thys approached Commander Hayes, who stood with tears on her face before Captain Morrison's memorial marker. Commander, Thys said softly, we owe you a debt we can never repay. Hayes looked up, her eyes red with grief. You don't owe us anything, Elder. This is what we do. This is who we are. But so many of your people died. They died free, Hayes replied. They died protecting innocent lives. That's how a human warrior wants to die. The memorial service lasted for hours. Each fallen human was remembered by name, their stories told by surviving friends. The Zephyrians listened and learned about beings they had once feared. Private Ryan Clark, who had held a position alone against impossible odds. Pilot Alex Turner, who had crashed his ship into an enemy vessel to save others. Captain Jake Morrison, who had led them all with courage and compassion. When it came time for Elder Thys to speak, she chose her words carefully. When we sent our distress call into space, we hoped for saviors, she said. When you arrived, we feared we had summoned demons instead. You were so different from us, so violent, so dangerous. She paused, looking at the mixed crowd of humans and Zephyrians. Now we understand the truth. You are both savior and demon, protector and destroyer. You carry within yourselves the capacity for terrible violence and profound love. What makes you unique is that you choose love, even when violence would be easier. Commander Hayes stepped forward. Elder, we'd like to make you an offer. Earth and her colonies are forming an alliance of free worlds, species that believe in protecting each other from threats like the Vorthak Empire. We'd be honored if Kalara would join us. The offer surprised everyone. The humans were not conquerors seeking tribute or overlords demanding submission. They were offering partnership, friendship, equality. What would this alliance require of us? Felix asked. Nothing you're not willing to give, Hayes replied. Share your knowledge, accept our protection when needed, and help us protect others when you can. No world stands alone. No species fights alone. The Zephyrian Council voted unanimously to accept. As the human ships prepared for departure, taking their wounded home and carrying the bodies of their honored dead, the relationship between the species had changed completely. The Zephyrians no longer saw humans as monsters. They saw them as the most dangerous friends anyone could ask for. Dr. Helen Ross, one of the few medical officers to survive, worked with Zephyrian healers to establish permanent medical exchange programs. Sergeant Maria Santos trained volunteer Zephyrian guards in basic self-defense, teaching them that sometimes violence was necessary to protect the innocent. The day came for final goodbyes. Elder Theiss stood with Commander Hayes at the landing pad where the human transport waited. "Will we see you again?" Theiss asked. "Probably not," Hayes admitted. "We'll be assigned to other missions, other worlds that need help. But you'll see other humans. And someday, when another species sends out a distress call, maybe some of your people will answer." The thought was startling. The Zephyrians, once the most peaceful species in the galaxy, were now talking about helping others in their time of need. "You've changed us," Theiss said. "Made us stronger." "You've changed us too," Hayes replied. "Reminded us why we fight." As the human ships departed Kalara for the last time, they left behind more than just a saved world. They left behind the seed of something new, a galaxy where different species could stand together, where the strong protected the weak, where no one had to face extinction alone. The story spread quickly through space. The Vorthak Empire, humbled by their defeat, began to reconsider their expansion plans. Other aggressive species looked at the growing human alliance and decided that conquest might be more difficult than they had thought. And in the depths of space, on worlds facing their own darkness, beings looked up at the stars and wondered, if they sent out a distress call, would the humans come? Would these strange warriors from the death world called Earth cross the void to stand with strangers? The answer, as the galaxy was learning, was always yes. The humans had kept their word to the Zephyrians, and in doing so, they